Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. There's a lot of stuff happening internationally. And actually was having a text conversation with my next guest, Professor Robert Patman, about whether or not we're going to be talking Gaza or the US elections, because both are almost perfect storms, pun intended. But then I left my phone at home, didn't I? So I didn't get the memo that we're actually going to be talking US politics today. Robert, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, Andrew.
There is much to be talking about, and there's kind of literally a perfect storm happening in the United States at the moment. Wanting to kick off with the hurricane battering Florida, the second hurricane in a couple of weeks. This is something which both sides are making a little bit of political capital from, and to be fair, this type of disruption sometimes doesn't favour the incumbent, because I suppose the current government gets measured on its response to a crisis.
It does, but and there's no doubt about it that Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance moved quickly to try to get the message across that the Biden administration was struggling to deal with these problems. However, there's a counter-argument that's been articulated by a number of commentators that attempt to exploit the crisis has backfired for two reasons. Firstly, two Republican governors, one in North Carolina and one in Florida, both publicly took issue with Mr. Trump's description of Biden's efforts through FEMA to assist the states in question to deal with the consequences of these terrible storms. And that is a pretty powerful rebuke. Both the one from DeSantis was particularly, the governor of Florida was particularly telling. He just said it's simply not true what Mr. Trump is saying about they are getting everything they need from the federal government. And the Republican governor said the same. So I'm sure that Mr. Trump would have won some brownie points with his attacks, but it also, I think, that's one point. The second point is it has reinforced the view amongst many Americans that these storms are much worse than the past. And it lends credibility to the Biden's position that America can't ignore climate change. You can't ignore scientific expertise on this issue. And Mr. Trump has already indicated that he probably quit the Paris Climate Accord again if he's elected president. So there's a couple of issues there that both sides are seeking to promote their various positions on, but it does highlight the chasm between these two contenders for office.
There is a chasm between them ideologically and politically, but just a hair's breadth actually between the two candidates, and which one is more likely to become president than the other. It all depends on how you measure it. And honestly, Robert, looking at the polls, it's all within the margin of error at the moment, because honestly, most of the states don't matter. It seems that Harris is ahead on percentage points, but it is the swing states. It is those key electoral college vital states that will make the difference, and they're very, very close.
They are, and I think the Biden administration's stance towards Gaza has certainly weakened Kamala Harris's prospects in places like Michigan, whereas a large Arab American population are not happy with the Biden administration's position. I think you're absolutely right. We could be on course for Kamala Harris winning the popular vote, but actually not necessarily making it to the White House. And Trump getting the keys to the Electoral College, so to speak, or keys to the White House via the Electoral College, I should say. That is a possibility, and I think it's a very, very keenly contested race. But my sense is that Harris still has quite a bit of momentum. If you look when Biden pulled out of the race, if you look at the position between the Democrats and the Republicans, you would say that Mr. Trump nothing could stop him. He looked like odds-on favorite to win. I don't think that's the case now. It's anyone's game.
Yeah.
And also, I think who puts their foot in it in the next month or the next few weeks could also determine it. It's a very close race.
Of course, there's a lot more riding on this than just who gets to be the leader of the free world. I mean, that's quite a big bar anyway, but the implications on this for what is happening in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon and Iran at the moment, for what is happening in Ukraine and for a number of other issues, who sits in the White House will make a big difference in those parts of the world and here in New Zealand as well.
Yes, I think the irony from New Zealand's point of view, when I say irony, it's an irony from the point of view of the centre-right national-led coalition that it would probably feel far more comfortable with Kamala Harris winning than it would with Donald Trump winning, which, this often happens in politics, that ideologies don't match up internationally always.
Yeah.
And I think this is a classic case. Why do I say that? It's no secret that the current government, and particularly Mr. Peters, the foreign minister, is not particularly comfortable with the Biden administration's approach towards Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And we made that quite clear. We went against the US position that there couldn't be a ceasefire by demanding one and calling for one repeatedly over 8 months.
Yeah.
The Biden administration eventually went to that position, but has been unable to enforce it.
Yeah.
With respect to Ukraine, with respect to the Gaza situation, I don't think there's too much to separate Biden and Trump. But one thing is clear: Mr. Trump will probably double down on his support for Mr. Netanyahu rather than be a little bit more measured. Kamala Harris has been the one person within the Biden administration who has expressed repeated concern about civilian casualties. Mm-hmm. On the Ukraine, the differences between the two camps are huge.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump said he'll be bringing peace to Ukraine within 24 hours, but Mr. Zelensky and many other observers believe that's because he will be delivering what Mr. Putin wants, which is to annex part of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so it'll be a peaceful land deal. And that makes many people feel very uncomfortable. That would be very bad news for a country like New Zealand, mm-hmm. which actually depends on international rules being observed.
Yeah.
And depends on countries not exercising the principle might is right. Mm. That will be a disaster for a country like our own, which trades with 100 countries around the world. So we have a huge stake with respect to Ukraine in Kamala Harris winning, who has pledged to continue the Biden support for Ukraine until Russian troops are ejected from the country. So I mean, the Pacific is another area which is important for New Zealand, where a Kamala Harris presidency would probably be a better fit for us than a Trump one. The Biden administration has played a big role in instituting annual U.S. Pacific conferences. That's with the Pacific island leaders.
Yep.
And also has extended 800 million in additional developmental and climate assistance. And Kamala Harris played a key role in that. So we were probably much more comfortable in terms of our people-to-people links with the Pacific and the fact that it takes up about 60% of our development aid. We would be much more comfortable with the enhanced engagement policy towards the Pacific that the Biden administration has shown. There's no guarantee that Mr. Trump, with his emphasis on America first, would actually continue that.
There's a bit of a wild card with Trump, and I suppose that is his style of politics, the way in which he reacts and responds, the sorts of policies that he does double down on, as you say, and uncertainty is never good for a stable global situation indeed. But honestly, we don't get a vote in it. We don't get to have a say. There's only a tenuous link, I think, between US citizens voting and the outcome given the electoral college system. However, it seems to be clear that one option would be better from a trade perspective and from a geopolitical perspective for New Zealand. Do you have any instincts on this one, which way it's going? As I said, it's within the margin of error, but I heard one commentator say that it's Trump's to lose at this point. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think if I had this conversation 2 months ago with you, Andrew, I would have agreed. I think the big mo, as the Americans call it, momentum, is important.
Yeah.
And I do think Kamala Harris showed in the debate with Mr. Trump that she was competent, measured, and certainly not intimidated by Mr. Trump. It's going to be a close race. I think that Harris at the moment has got the edge.
Yeah.
The other thing is, because one of Mr. Trump's strengths, his unpredictability, is also his weakness.
Yeah.
Which means that many of his camp are infuriated with him much of the time because he doesn't stay on message, as Americans like to say. So I do think that could work against him. There have also been some October surprises, haven't there? Even his supporters were taken back by the revelation in Bob Woodward's book called War, that at the height of the COVID crisis, when Americans were scrambling to get access to COVID-19 testing kits, Mr. Trump was shipping off at taxpayers' expense just those kits to the Kremlin, and Mr. Putin has confirmed that subsequently. That's not gone down well. It also raises questions about Mr. Trump's sense of national priorities. Many people have been puzzled by his soft spot for Putin and wonder if there's something more involved. Mr. Woodward also made the point that since he's left the office, Mr. Trump has stayed in close dialogue with Mr. Putin, making something like 7 personal calls with him in the Kremlin. Now, we are talking about a leader who has responsible for the death of many of his opponents, and also for clamping down on the independent media in Russia, and of course launching an illegal and barbaric invasion of another country. So I think all these revelations don't actually help Mr. Trump too much, but he's got very enthusiastic support behind him. So it's going to be a close race and a fascinating one. It will have big implications for New Zealand, even if we don't have any say in the outcome.
Robert, we certainly appreciate your wisdom and insight as always. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.